The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. My sisters and brothers, the gospel of the Lord. Well, believe it or not, we are still at the top of the year. So the opportunity to start something new is still before you, or perhaps you've started something new and it's just gone off the rails and it's time to start it again. And we are still in our preaching series called Let's Get It Started, a way to try to understand how we start new things, what we need to do to begin new things, and what does the teaching of Christ have to say about that particular dynamic or those kind of opportunities. We've heard 2 weekends of calling of the first disciples, so a couple weekends of that, one from John, one from Mark, of calling the disciples. And now we get to see Jesus beginning to teach in his synagogue. So I don't know how your year has started off with that in mind, but one of the things that helps us start new things is stopping other stuff. So clearing the decks, right? So because on the one hand, we have a finite amount of space in our lives, but an infinite amount of desires. And this might be really obvious when you stand in front of your closet and say, why do I have all this stuff? Why do I have all this stuff? And so this is maybe a good time of year to say, wow, I just need to either wear this or give it away. I need to wear this or give it away. You know, one of those kind of dynamics. Maybe the same is for your home screen or your photos or for your travel mugs or, you know, anything that just kind of begins to like stack up. That if you want to move forward, you kind of have to clear out first. Now, if those are the objects in your life, the same dynamic is often true for our interior, because our interior can get pretty cluttered with bad habits or with just stuff that we're holding on to, where this is a good time of year if we want to actually make a fresh start is to clear the decks a little bit, clear the decks. That would be the same dynamic. And it's not always easy, but luckily we have Jesus as a model for us in this attempt to clear the decks in order to begin something new. And we see him at work in this particular reading where he and his disciples show up in Capernaum and they go into a synagogue and Jesus begins teaching. He's very popular because he seems to have a lot of power and authority. And then to prove it, he casts a demon out of a guy, and everyone thinks he's great, and he's a hero. Terrific. All of that is good. Let's just take a look at those kind of pieces of that might be helpful for us at this point in our lives. A couple things stand out to me, at least. In this particular story, early on in the Gospel of Mark, we see Jesus hard at work with insiders. We'll see him at work with a lot of outsiders, with prostitutes, with tax collectors, centurions, all the rest. But he's at work in a synagogue, right? He's in a synagogue. Now, a synagogue is a particular kind of gathering place. So that's what synagogue means, is gathering. It's kind of like a church, but kind of not. So it's a gathering. So he's there, and people are welcome to talk about the law in this particular place. So he's there, he's talking about the law. And he is taking it apart for them, and people are saying, wow, he's teaching with authority and someone that we can believe. And then he does this curing, this casting out of an unclean spirit from a person that's on the inside of a faith community, okay? So it's someone that's possessed on the inside of a faith community, right? Okay, good. Because the synagogue is often not just a place to encounter the word, but it's also kind of a community center. So there would be rooms for people if they needed a place temporarily. There'd be food, water, kind of supplies, and people that were in distress, like the guy that he encounters, who has this unclean spirit. Okay, good. So that's what's happening in there. It's important to us to see that this is the inside sort of job. Now, sometimes we think about the person that Jesus is healing as being possessed. we might have a stereotypical notion of a possessed person. They're writhing on the ground, foaming at the mouth, and they're just generally possessed. Like there's something going on in them. And we might, think about, well, that was this medical condition or this mental illness or whatever. But within the story, it's someone that is seen as having something inside that they can't control. So we think about that as someone just generally. But just for the sake of argument or illumination, I hope, think about that person as being possessed by something or some things that haunt all of us. And within a church setting, within a faith community setting. What if that person was possessed by the demon of... Now, what are some typical things that we all get possessed of within a faith community? What if they were possessed with the demon of impatience? What if they were... Maybe that's something that you sometimes feel. I know I sometimes feel it. What if they were possessed by the demon of hard-heartedness or unforgivingness, an inability to forgive? That's what's possessing them. Or, in my mind, one of the things that haunts parish communities, but almost all human organizations, anybody who has a job knows this is a problem, is that we're often possessed by the demon of gossip, right? Of gossip. Where we walk away from conversations, we're like, why on earth did I say that? Why did I need to tear that person down? Why did I need slander? Yes, it's true, but why did I repeat that? Why was I somehow possessed by this demon of gossip? So what if that person that he's casting the demon out of is possessed by the demon of gossip within that faith community? Now, I think that's something that we could identify with. And we might ask questions like, why do people gossip anyway? Why do people gossip? Here's some of the reasons that people have suggested that why people gossip in organizations, like this one, like faith communities, like work, it's just a habit. We're just used to talking about people. We just don't even think about it. We just blah, 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 blah. We just kind of, or maybe belonging. Sometimes gossip helps us feel like we're part of the group. We're talking crap about other people that aren't in the room. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's belonging. Maybe it's attention. You know that feeling when you have a juicy tidbit and you're like, okay, I'm loaded, and you can start talking, you get attention, and people want to hear, and then you get to have that feeling when you walk away, why did I say that? Why did I feel I needed to do that? Because gossip just continues to tear apart a community and lower all the trust in a community all the time. So how do we change that? And sometimes we even think, I'm not gossiping, I'm just venting. I'm just venting. Someone comes into your office or into your room, can I just vent for a second? You're like, well, maybe. What's the difference between venting and gossip? It turns out venting, if you really want to do venting, kind of ends with an action step. So maybe someone comes in, is talking about this coworker, blah, 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 blah. At the end, you're like, so are you going to go talk to them? Because talking to me isn't helping. Or that maybe it's true, but are you going to talk to them? Then maybe they need to do that to say, yeah, I'm going to go talk to them. That would be venting. As opposed to gossip, which just goes at it, they did this, and have you noticed how much weight they've gained? And that haircut? And all that sort of stuff? And we're just saying, yeah, you're right. All this passive aggression. And it doesn't go anywhere. There's no action step other than this ugly feeling of being possessed by this demon of a lowering trust, of distrust of everyone around you. Because we all feel that every time we gossip or someone gossips to us, we think, well, if I leave the room, they're going to do the same thing about me. You know that feeling? So how do we change that? We call on Christ. We say, here it is happening in this gospel reading, where someone is delivered of that particular demon. How is it when those things come up that we just don't ignore it and we don't enter into it? And we build new scripts to deal with that moment in those conversations where we say, I don't think we should talk about that. Why don't you tell him that to his face? Do you think she has maybe other stuff going on in her life? Learn to change the script all the time, because we can and we must, if our communities are going to build in trust of each other, to know that we are trusted and valued even when we're not in the room. This haunts almost all organizations. And we get to see it right here in the gospel about how does God use this story of Christ for us to say, oh, it's possible to be changed, to be delivered of that, so that we could actually clear the decks and be open for the goodness of God to work through us rather than placing an obstacle to it.